Welcome to our Chapter 8 lecture. I think that you will find this lecture very interesting as it touches on various topics and subject matters that are that hit close to home for a lot of people. So take good notes. Of course, this will be used for assignments and future quizzes and exams. So let's get started. We're going to talk about our bureaucratic organizational structure and the advantages and disadvantages to this structure. We will review departmentalization, the bureaucratic structure modified, and some of the key influencers and major key influencers of organization structure and major aspects of organizational culture. Then we will discuss how we go about managing change. And when it comes to the Q&A, what I want you guys to do is when you have any questions about this lecture or any other lectures, please email me so that I can then respond and possibly respond back in a video, so that others can benefit. So, in your own words, please define a bureaucracy without looking in the textbook and without Google searching it. And when the first thing you think about when you think about bureaucracy, what is it? Well, Debrin defines bureaucracy, and I'm going to there we go. Trying to do this properly. As a systematic, rational, and precise form of organization where rules, regulations, and techniques of control are specifically defined. So, there's no room for wiggling, right? There's no wiggle room. This is the traditional form of an organization. This is how our earliest forms of organizations were erected and built upon. That's how many of you have interacted within companies, and you're starting to see a shift away from some bureaucratic structures. Not all. For instance, our government is a bureaucratic organization. You'll have many nonprofits and even for-profits that are set up with these specific systematic rules and regulations and techniques. And, you know, a lot of times you think about red tape. So one thing I want to make sure is that you don't confuse it with bigness, because although I mentioned our federal government and even our many of our state and local agencies that are bureaucratic, it does not necessarily mean big. You can be a small entity of 5 employees and have a lot of rules and regulations and techniques and processes that define your organization. So don't confuse it with bigness, because it can also be a small organization. So there are there are advantages. Make sure I didn't skip. There are advantages of bureaucracy. And of course, there are some disadvantages. A advantage would be you know who is responsible for what. And give me 1 second, because I think I did. I skipped. I think I need to be able to provide you guys with the principles of bureaucracy before I tell you about the advantages and disadvantages. So the principles, we have authority. There's a hierarchy, right? The power structure, the authority is going to start at the top, is usually the head of your organization. And the lower extremities of that body is controlled by the head. And so everything is forced down. All directives are coming from the top going down. And so there is usually one superior person. And that person represents, and that's how your unity of command is represented. You have a head who's usually your president or your chief executive officer. And from there, you have branches that are like the limbs of a body. And that is what your team reports up that structure to. So that's the unity of command. Task specialization is where you're able to designate specific divisions or departments within an organization, and there's specialized workers that are assigned tasks based on where they are placed within that division or department. Right? So you may have accounting and things of that nature. Responsibilities and job descriptions. These are where you have your formal rules. Right? You have to follow your job description as it's outlined, understanding that there's usually one little small sentence at the end that says, and duties as assigned. Right? That's usually how your boss can explain away why they are adding things to your plate when it's not defined by your job description. But that's usually because they add that one line in there that says, and other duties as defined. So you have formal rules. You have line and staff functions. It's simply put, your line team, your line functions are the primary's organizational purpose. It is the main reason why your company is doing what it does, right? It's the, it could be, and it could also be the outputs. So it can be that you guys are a shoe manufacturer, you are a baby food manufacturer, a wig manufacturer, whatever it is. Those are the people that are doing the day-to-day. Your staff support the line. So you have your staff team who are actually going to help support the functions of the line team. Exhibit 8.1 on page 264 breaks down the principles of bureaucracy and gives you some more details. Now, the advantages and disadvantages. Here are some advantages. You know who's responsible for what. Because you have your organizational chart, you get to see the unity of command. You then know who you report to and who is going to be responsible for what, because everyone's job descriptions and tasks and all the different functions in the day-to-day are already outlined. You know who can make decisions in the company, because why? Usually the decision makers are listed on that organizational chart, or it's clearly defined based on their title, and there's some kind of handbook or supplement that is explaining to you who you report to, who has the right to make decisions about what and whom. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, there are clearly outlined rules, policies, and regulations. And so then there's a less likelihood that there's something that you just can't find out, right? There's usually going to be a policy about timesheets and about vacation and when you are to clock in and how they address dress code and sexual harassment and stalking and so on and so forth. There's going to be regulations about how you can dump chemicals. There's going to be rules about so on and so forth. So it's going to be very structured, and there are certain personality types, certain types of individuals who thrive in highly structured environments. They need the regimented infrastructure in order to be able to perform at a high standard. Now, some disadvantages are because it is so rigid, it can be very difficult in handling various people and problems. And because, you've got all of these steps that you have to do, and it's all of these processes and all of these forms, and so you cannot be as creative and as innovative because you're having to follow step A before you can get to step B, and it's very rigid. So that could also create inefficiency and, in turn, inconvenience. Why? Because you have these extra layers of approval before decisions can be made. And because you've had these added layers, you're causing delays. And if I have to go through 4 people to have a decision made, that process may take 2 weeks, when if I could just go to one person, it could possibly take no more than 2 days. A third thing is that a lot of workers pass responsibility to other departments or divisions, especially when you're dealing with problems. Excuse me. And so you kind of pass the buck, right? Or you throw people under the bus, not literally, but figuratively. You kind of say, oh, that's not us, or that wasn't me, that was so-and-so. And so when you have these kind of rigid structures, you can create those kind of problems. Another problem is the silo mentality. Oh, this is what happens when you have, it's like this, you see it a lot, especially in the teen movies that many of us have grown up watching, whether you watch it as a teen or you're watching it now with your children or your nieces or nephews. And that's where one group feels highly competitive with the other groups. And they're so competitive, it's like they're in their own bubble. They've created their own little bubble, and it's us against them, and we're going to do things our way. Well, what happens is that creates a lack of cooperation, because you're not working as a team with the entire, group, with the entire company. You're only working with a team within your own small little subset. So how is that? There's no cohesiveness. There's no possible way. And so this mentality can cause a lot of discord in an organization, because you're creating an us versus them. And the only time you should feel competitive on that level is if it's your company against another company, right? But not within your own company. It's different if you're being competitive, like, okay, you guys, let's try to create 20 widgets more than Sam's team. Okay, that's like healthy competition, right? But the silo mentality is much deeper. It reminds you of, like I said, those cliquish teen movies, or what you remember growing up in high school or junior high. It's the same kind of mindset. So bureaucracy can cause a lot of frustration because there's so much red tape. There's 25,000 steps to take, 2 steps. You have to go to the so-and-so department, and speak to Sally over in this department, and she has to give you form 245B, and that form has to be taken over to Greg, who's going to give you form 16164, and you're like, oh my goodness, I just needed a day off for work because I'm having a root canal, right? But it can be very frustrating because of that. And something else that happens is there's a lot of meetings. Oh my goodness. There can be 5 meetings when only 2 are required, right? And when you have so many meetings to make a decision, it slows down the decision-making process, sometimes to an absolute halt. Because the more meetings you have, that means there's more people talking. That means there's more variables thrown in, more opinions put in, more things being tabled for another meeting, and wait until we get to speak to so-and-so. We got to get Form 1629B in first before we can, just make a decision on Form 2941. So it can slow things down considerably. And here's a great example. Is in 2010, remember the earthquake in Haiti. What a lot of people did not realize was that a lot of medical supplies were either delayed or not received due to the enormous amount of red tape that the Haitian government had put in place for their customs procedures. So rather than having a standard procedure for regular kind of importing and exporting, and then having a separate procedure for emergency situations so that they could expedite those supplies on a faster basis, they instead use the same system that they use for their normal import and export of goods, and things were significantly delayed or they were returned. So if you didn't properly label the supplies that you sent to Haiti, they probably were returned back, or they just were stopped and just never dispersed. They never even left, right? Because of so much bureaucratic red tape. So this is just one example of millions of bureaucratic blunders that have taken place since the beginning of traditional organizations. Exhibit 8.2 in your textbook, there is a bureaucratic orientation quiz on pages 267 and 268. I really think that you guys should take this quiz. It is so helpful when applying for jobs or when you start your own business and you want to create your own business structure. Take the quiz and see how much you enjoy or you despise working in a bureaucratic environment. It is so helpful. And the reason why I said it's helpful is because if you dislike bureaucratic environments, you're going to make a big mistake every time you apply for a job at a company that is highly bureaucratic. It's going to just drive you batty. So you need to find environments and you need to apply for jobs that are more flexible, that have less barriers, less restrictions, less red tape. And sometimes people have a lot of burnout, have a lot of issues working at companies, and it usually comes down to 2 things. Usually you're in the wrong kind of business structure, right? Or you're in a business structure that has the wrong kind of corporate culture, and we'll talk about that shortly. So take this quiz. It's not mandatory, but you should take it, and you can send me an email and let me know where your orientation lies. It'll be very interesting to see. So let's talk about departmentalization. This is where we subdivide work in an organization, right? You guys do it even, at home. You can break things up based on, you guys can break things up based on hierarchy in the family. You can break things up based on different parts of your home. But in the workplace, let's look at how we can break it up. We can break it up using our functional process. And that's where you can separate your people by the functions in which they serve. So it could be accounting, sales, human resources, finance, so on and so forth. This is really great when you have large batches of work that have to be done on a consistent, recurring basis, right? So it's just redundancy of work that needs to be performed. And it's also really great when you're in desperate need of a specialist to perform the task. So you need a person who is an HR specialist, an accounting specialist, whatever. Someone that is all they do. They live, breathe, and eat that particular function. This is where separating by functions is very beneficial. On page 269, you'll see exhibits 8.3 and 8.4 that outline this even greater. Now, your second process is geographic, and that's where everything is arranged by geographic territories or the areas where a company serves their customers. And so this works very well for international businesses as well for marketing divisions that are usually segmented by territories. So your sales team can be divided in regions of west, southeast. It could be divided by United States, or it could be North America sales team, Europe sales team, South Africa sales team, so on and so forth, where you can have them divided up by countries, by continents, by regions, so on and so forth. A third process is the product service. And this is where the department is segmented by the product or service that they provide. So it could be broken up by children's clothing, or it can be broken up by, barbering or massage therapy. So Exhibit 8.5 on page 271 explains this in greater detail. So we have a bureaucratic organization that is modified. And this is where you take your traditional organization and you tweak it somewhat. Exhibit 8.6 shows you project and matrix organizations. A lot of educational institutions have a matrix organization. And with a matrix organization, that's usually where an employee is reporting to 2 or more managers, right? You can actually possibly report to 4 or 5. And there are some advantages and disadvantages to that type of organizational structure. At some points, I want to pull my hair out when I think of matrix organizations. IBM is an example of a matrix organization because they deal heavily with engineering and things of that nature. There's a lot of complicated inputs and outputs for their company, and so they use a matrix organization in order to address each of the functions within the company. Your flat structure is where you have less layers, right? There's a larger span of control, so there are not 4 degrees of separation between you and the CEO. There may be 1 or 2 degrees of separation, meaning that you may actually have a frequent interaction with the chief executive officer of the company. Unlike in most bureaucratic organizations, you may never see or interact with the CEO of your company because the degrees of separation are so vast. So with flat structures, there's fewer layers, there's a larger span of control, and oftentimes with a flat structure, you actually have greater say. There's more empowerment of employees on all levels in flatter structures. Now, downsizing, some of you have heard of it, some of you have taken part in it, some of you have been on the receiving end of it. It's studied, we talked about it in chapter 3 as it was related to social responsibility, but basically downsizing is an organization's way of simplifying it to make it less bureaucratic, believe it or not, right? Believe it or not, you're downsizing, you're making the organization flatter. You're slimming out, you're thinning it out. And so it can lead to better profits. It can increase your stock prices. It can be very expensive because you're having to cover disability claims, severance pay, And usually when you start letting employees go, your remaining employees' morale starts to go down the drain. And so their productivity also goes down the drain. Why? Because I'm stressed, I'm depressed, I'm wondering if I'm going to get laid off or fired also. And I'm now not going to create as many widgets as I normally do. I'm not going to meet with as many clients as I normally do. So your productivity goes down, and for those reasons, guess what? The company is you're going to pay for that, because if work isn't being performed, that's money that's going down the drain. So that's the basis of downsizing. Outsourcing, don't cringe, right? When we talk about outsourcing, and people immediately think of a global takeover of your American job. And please note that outsourcing is both domestic and global. Domestic in the fact that if you don't have an HR department within your organization, you can outsource those responsibilities to a company that focuses on HR, human resources, and they can handle all of those details for you. The same is true with payroll. You may not have an accounting and payroll division in your company or department in your company, so you can outsource these services to a payroll company. Globally, of course, you can be able to expand your business to go global and outsource certain elements of the work into other countries and have workers from those countries do the work. This is also a reciprocal process, because you will also have companies from other countries who also will outsource their work here to the U.S. And so that then employs U.S. workers. So there's pluses and minuses to outsourcing. Home shoring. This is where you move your customer service into your employees' homes as a form of telecommuting. And you see this now with medical billing, and where you have the billing and they're also handling customer service. There's other times where companies are outsourcing that, or not outsourcing, but they're telecommuting their customer service into employees' homes. It cuts down on the overhead expenses within the company. Why? Because that company is now not paying for the square footage of having bodies within a building. So this is especially great for a company that is downsizing and needs to offload property, whether they're getting out of a lease or selling a building. And at that point, they can then put all their customer service people, they can keep them by having them work from home. All right. Now, a horizontal structure. That you can see some of the projects on page 274 and 278 with exhibits 8.6 and 8.7. So with a horizontal structure, it's an arrangement of work by multidisciplinary teams. So you have these different teams, and it's literally going across the board. So a lot of times you'll see a connection between the horizontal structure and your flat structure, if you can look and see those similarities and also the demarcations. Informal structures and communication networks, those are supplements that the formal structure unofficially, has. You unofficially have this to take care of various events and transactions that are not covered by the formal structure, right? So it helps you take care of some unofficial things. And your power sharing at highest level of management. Simply put, this is when you usually have 2 co-founders, 2 co-CEOs, things of that nature. That's where you have 2 heads that run the body, not just one. So you have 2 people that are sharing that role. And there's, you'll read further in the chapter, there have been some, questions as to how effective that is. I will say one of the companies that I own, I am the co-owner. I am co-CEO. And what we did was I recommended that, I'm not really big on titles. So what I recommended was that we create creative titles based on what we intended to do within the company, so that we weren't, being sucked into the traditional view of a CEO. So my business partner has the title of a chief visionary officer. He is a huge visionary. He is always looking far and wide and in these insane levels of the abyss. And I am listed as the chief global strategist. And so I am focused on what our global strategy, what we will do to reach our long-term goals globally. And so by us doing this, it allows us to share power in a way that we're not necessarily stepping on each other's toes or asking for permission or having to wait for certain things. We kind of just focus on our strengths. Excuse me. So here's some key influencers of the organizational structure. As I mentioned just a while ago, our strategy and goals, right? So your strategy is usually long-term. It's looking out 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 years. And the goals that you need to set in order to achieve what it is that your organization wants. Technology is always changing, and so organizations have to be able to adapt and embrace the technology that is needed in order to have a competitive advantage in the marketplace, wherever industry that you serve. And so you can't keep using 1984 technology, right, in the 2000s. It's not going to work. You need to be able to find a way to streamline your processes faster and to be able to find a way to get things done in a timely fashion with the quality and level of detail that your customers expect. And that's where your technology comes in. It can make or break an organization. Your size, whether it's small or large or ginormous, right? Your size plays a major impact on the structure. Based on your size will help determine what kind of organizational structure works best for you. The financial condition of your organization, that's a no-brainer. If you are broke, you're not going to have any employees soon, right? So if your company is struggling financially, you have to then figure out, what are we going to do? Maybe we have to outsource. Maybe we have to downsize. Maybe we have to, homeshore. What can we do to recover financially? Environmental stability, and I don't mean the air that you're breathing. I mean the cultural ecosystem, the health of your interaction amongst your employees. The culture is formed and created and enforced by the head, by the body of the organization, and that culture is then pressed downward towards the rest of your company. Well, that creates an environment, and it could be a toxic environment, it could be a thriving environment, but whatever it is, it's going to permeate through the entire organization. So that is also a major influence. Now, here's 3 heavyweights: delegation, empowerment, and decentralization. Delegation is your ability to assign formal authority and responsibility to someone else. And it's done to help increase your own productivity. All right? Why? Because you're taking things off your plate. if you have 20 things on your plate to take care of, and you know that you can only reasonably handle 15, that means you need to delegate those other 5 to one or more other capable workers who can handle the job at the level that you need. And in your textbook, you'll see the way that many people blunder the process of delegating, because oftentimes they aren't specific, or they're too detailed oriented. Like, you're going to tell someone step by step what to do, which defeats the purpose. You neglect to check progress, so you just delegate a task and then you don't follow up to see how someone's doing. And or you check up so much that it's like you're micromanaging, right? The people are just like, oh my goodness, you could have just done the task on your own. So there are, of course, some things that you have to steer clear of through the act of delegation, and that's the reason why they really do call it an art form. It is an art to be able to let go of your controlling nature, to feel that I can do it, or I can do it better and faster than it would take someone else to do it, and just realizing that it's going to make you more productive. It took me years to be able to delegate, and I have 2 assistants, and I struggle delegating to them. And so finally, I finally had to let go of certain things, and then the past 2 weeks I've been just delegating away, and it's so empowering. I've been more productive, and so I have to just remember, it's making me more productive if I can actually assign someone to do something else for me, to take something off my plate. And so with this, you also can see how empowerment, which is your ability to share power with your team, it's your ability to make it less about you and more about your team, and how that actually impacts and enhances their feelings of being personally effective within their role and their place within an organization. That you're going to say, you know what, you can make that decision on your own, or I trust you, go ahead and do what you feel is right, or I trust you, and that's the thing, is that when you actually not only say it, but you mean, and you give, and you encourage trust and transparency and vulnerability, your team members will do it in return, not only to and for you, but for other employees. So the 2 are literally tied to effective management. Those 2 piggyback, they tag team each other, and that is what really helps with effectively managing not only your team but your organization. Why? Because you're assigning duties to the right people, right? When you're delegating, you're not going to delegate the creation of a proposal to someone that can't form 2 strands of thought together, right? So you're going to assign the duties to the right people. You're going to delegate the entire task, not piecemeal it out, not ration it out, but you're going to delegate the whole task, and then you're going to step back from those details, right? You're going to step back from the details. You're going to give as much instruction as needed, because why? Some people need added instruction. They need to come back to you and say, okay, can you please elaborate on this? Or I'm stuck. I got to this part and I need help with this. And then you're going to retain some of the important tasks for yourself. There's certain important tasks that these are top priority tasks. These are highly sensitive tasks. I'm going to retain these for myself. And then you're going to get feedback on the task that you delegated. You're going to sit back and ask that person, Sandra, tell me how, what did you learn from this? Or what was your feedback? What's your, Was this something that you'd like to do again? Is this something that you want to run from? How could I have assisted you better? So on and so forth. You're going to get feedback. You want that person to what? Feel empowered. That you didn't just throw some menial work to them. You didn't just throw something at them to watch them fail, but you actually want to see them succeed and thrive. And so getting that feedback means that it was of great importance to you and that you value their feedback. So, decentralization is the authority passed down to lower levels. What you're then doing when you decentralize your organization, you're telling people on the lower rungs of the ladder that they can make decisions, that they can actually force things up the ladder to the top, that they can have the autonomy to do things without waiting for permission. They can just get it done. Now, centralization is where all authority is kept at the top. Only the head and whoever the head says can actually make decisions and do anything of great importance. So let's be clear. There is no organization that is 100% centralized or 100% decentralized. Some actually do both simultaneously. And the reason why DeBren made a point of saying that no organization is completely centralized or decentralized is because there are certain elements that in a centralized organization, there are certain elements that the CEO is not going to say, no, only I can make a decision on that, or only I have the authority on that, when it's something that could be very minor that anyone within the organization can do. And the truth is the same is true in a decentralized organization. There are certain things that, okay, great, yes, you have the authority, but there's certain things, no, you cannot make the decision on. That is going to strictly be a head honcho's decision. Only the CEO can make a decision on that, right? So, I mean, in that case, if it was a fully 100% decentralized organization, that would then basically mean that, the frontline manager could be the one that writes checks for all the employees, right? No, it's not. No. So there's certain things, it's an ebb and flow in all organizations. So our culture, I mentioned this earlier, your organizational culture. This is also called your corporate culture. It is how your values and beliefs that you share amongst your team members, how they influence the behavior of the team. So your corporate culture can be very toxic, right? It could be very sexist, racist, xenophobic, Islamophobic, or it could be very thriving and very healthy, where everyone just feels like a very healthy family, not a dysfunctional one. And so there's certain determinants that help you figure out the organizational culture. Of course, it's the personality of your founder or founders, right? If that person is a jerk, most likely your culture within your organization is going to be fear-based. People are going to most likely fear that founder, or the CEO, and they then end up, the bullied become bullies, right? You can also look at the values and the administrative practices. How do your administrators handle certain processes and forms, and how are paychecks dispersed? Are they floating your check and you're supposed to get paid every Friday, but for whatever reason they wait and they don't pay you till Monday? That says a lot about your corporate culture. Looking at the leader's vision. Where is the leader looking outward? for the company. That can impact your corporate culture. And also the subculture, looking at how you can create different cliques within your organization. How are those cliques impacting, multiple groups of people within the company? And then lastly, it's the society's norms, beliefs, and values, and how they find their way back into your organization through conversations that employees are having with each other, through education, and through the media, which also includes social media. And so if the hogwash that is being spewed outside in society is weaving and bleeding its way into the organization, that can be very toxic, because you can come to a point where people are physically assaulting each other over their norms, beliefs, and values. So, dimensions of culture are going to be addressed next, and we're going to talk about how it's learned. So, as I mentioned, subcultures, and those are your subgroups, those are your cliques, right? And they're from different dominant cultures and other groups within the organization, and they come together. Sometimes it can be you came together because, oh my gosh, there's 4 of us that are from the same fraternal organization, or oh my goodness, there's 10 of us and we all went to the same college, or oh, here's the 4 black people that work for the company. Oh, wow, there's 10 of us here and we're all Muslim. Oh, well, only 2 of us are Sunni Muslim. Oh, so this is how subcultures are formed, right? And they differ from the dominant culture. They come together in their little subgroups. So we have 6 dimensions that really influence the culture of your organization. It's your values, as I mentioned earlier, how diverse your organization is, and how resources are allocated, right? And how rewards are dispersed. How are people rewarded within your organization? Is there a sense of favoritism? Is it based on a individual efforts, or is it based on a group effort? Those kind of things take into place. Degree of change. Not only if your organization is embracing change, but how quickly it embraces change, how quickly it expects the employees to embrace change, and how quickly employees do embrace change. So those degrees of change can drastically impact your culture. If there's a sense of ownership, you will know whether or not there's a sense of ownership when you have high theft in your company from your employees. There's no sense of ownership from those employees, because when employees truly do think and believe and embrace a mindset that this too is my company, then guess what? They're not stealing from the company. No one steals from their own home, right? You don't go in your house and steal something. It's yours. And so when you placed a value upon your job in the company where you work, and you see your paycheck as almost like a dividend for the investment that you put in, then you have a sense of ownership. And then, of course, the 6th dimension is the strength of the culture. How strong is the culture? If it is weak, if it's flimsy, then guess what? It can easily sway and be manipulated, be transformed into something else. So on page 290, you'll see Exhibit 10, which defines and really shows you more in depth about these dimensions. You'll also read more about socialization, and that's how we come to understand the different values and customs and norms that are essential for our ability to adapt within an organization. And so it's the actual process that we take to get there. On pages 290 through 293, you can actually see and read about the consequences and the implications of how an organization's culture and how to manage and sustain a culture within an organization. So I talked about change briefly, and let's go a little bit deeper. We have 5 components to change. And, you know, I used to always say that people don't like change, but actually it was redefined in my mind by a book that I was reading. That is not that people don't like change, it's the fact that people don't like the unknown. We don't like those variables that possibly help create fear within us. We want to know. If we have more information, then guess what? We're more willing to change. And so the first component we look at is change at the individual level compared to our organizational level. And on that organizational level, it requires more attention, right? Because it's broader and it's more people that are involved in the process. And on the individual level, it's just me having to change some element, some feature of myself and how I embrace something, or you know, my ability to stop doing an old process that we did for 5 years and start a new process. And so that's something that's going to be individual. Our second component is the model of our change process. We go from 3 different stages of unfreezing, where we're reducing or eliminating our resistance to change, right? We're like, okay, all right, I'm okay, all right, I'm not gonna fight this. And then we go through our changing process, and that's when we're moving on to our next level. This is where we have some group discussions, we have two-way communication, we're actually embracing it, and we're like, okay, this is good. I can get this. I'm cool with this. I can work with this. And then when we get to refreezing, this is where we're able to point out the success of how that change was implemented, and we can look for ways in how we can reward people who were involved in implementing the change. And so when we're refreezing, so it's literally like a part of, like, if you think about it this way, if you're gonna thaw out some food, right? You're gonna thaw it out. You're going to then mold it into, something else, right? And then what happens is that then you're going to refreeze it. This is done. Or you're going to cook it and then eat it. That could be your refreezing phase. So once again, unfreezing is you're reducing your resistance to change, or you're totally getting rid of your resistance and you're just saying, you know what, I'm cool with this. Changing is the actual process. You're moving on, you're discussing it, you're seeing how you can play an active role in it. And then refreezing is when the team has successfully implemented the change, and now we want to reward all of those people that took part in making sure that we could successfully implement it. The biggest problem is our resistance to change. That's our biggest problem. And that's because we're stuck. You know, we are stuck. We are fearful. We are frustrated. We are a whole bunch of things, but whatever we are, we're not moving. And we put our head in the sand, our feet in the sand. We don't want to do it. And it's usually why we've been doing it this way, or why, or it doesn't make sense. And usually the resistance to change is because you have people that are not communicating fully. There's not enough transparency. You're not addressing the fears. You're not addressing the hesitations. You're not addressing the unknowns. And so people are very resistant to change. And so a way of gaining support for change is looking at the 8 techniques that you see on pages 296 to 298. And there's some great techniques that you can use there. And then, of course, you can read about Six Sigma on pages 298 to 299. And it's a philosophy that's focused on driving out waste, right? There's a lot of waste that can build up in a company. And you're trying to focus on eliminating that waste and improving the quality and the cost and time performance of a company. And so when you're using Six Sigma, They're very highly focused on data and how data moves the markers within your company, because what you're really focusing on is near perfection, and you want the quality of the products and the services that you put out there to be nearly perfect. And your focus is going to be on how can you prevent problems, because if you have a problem, guess what? That problem then slows you up. So that means the performance and productivity is reduced, and and that means that is an immediate cost factor. Immediately there is a dollar amount that's tied to the slowing up of your production and performance. So be sure to read about Six Sigma on pages 298 and 299. So if you have any questions, please make sure that you email me, and possibly I can then create a video. If not, I will be able to share as an announcement. Now, your Chapter 8 assignment, make sure that you guys are using the cover page, that you're using a title page, and that you're using either the MLA or the APA format that I've provided. And your paper must always be what? 12-point font, Times New Roman, preferably, and double spaced. Please, no triple space, no single space, no quadruple space. I don't want to see 3 inches separating your paragraphs. Use the formatted papers that I've already given you, and all you have to do is just type right over, you kind of highlight and type right over those individual sections, and it's formatted for you. Pay close attention to the instructions. Everything is clearly defined for you. With that, this is the end of our lecture. I hope that it has been informative. I hope that if you had any questions about certain functions and terminology beforehand, that I've helped clear it up. If you have any questions about anything, please email me. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.